Welcome to Old News, weekly ancient artifacts. I'm Nachliel Sullivan, the museum guy, and in this series we're going to explore connections between ancient artifacts and the weekly Torah reading. Together we'll embark on a journey of discovery, exploring the rich tapestry of history, art, culture, and the universal human experience. It's the second week of Bereshit, of Genesis, and our parasha is Parashat Noach, the story of Noah, which really is bracketed by the story of the flood and the Tower of Babel, with 10 generations in between. For this week's artifact, I chose the Sumerian Kings list. It's a great way to discuss two very important issues in this parasha. My working assumption is that the Torah is an eternal document, and yet it carries a unique message and meaning to every generation and to every individual. With that being said, the Torah is thousands of years old, and it was given at a time in which we were sensitive to certain cultures and certain realities and certain stories and ideas that are lost on us today. We just really don't get them. And just like the average person in modern society really doesn't get the agricultural metaphors and how they relate to international relations or becoming a better human being. With that being said, I think that the Sumerian Kings list opens up our eyes to the cultural background in which we lived, and I'd like to think about what the stories in Parashat Noach would mean to a person who's aware of these cultural references. The Sumerian Kings list is a small brick of mud which was written on in the Sumerian language in the Akkadian script, and it was found in the city of Uruk in Mesopotamia. A little bit about Sumer. Sumer is the area in Mesopotamia between the Tigris and the Euphrates River, which used to be a lot closer to the Persian Gulf, which has receded over thousands of years. And it's in this area that we have cities such as Ur, where Abraham comes from, or Eridu, which, according to the Sumerian Kings list, is the first settled city in civilization, even though archaeological evidence shows that it probably is not. But this document was found in the city of Uruk. And you may have heard of the city of Uruk in Torah. It's called Erech, and it's mentioned in the 10 generations following the flood. The Sumerian Kings list found in the city of Uruk is currently in the Ashmolean Museum at Oxford University. What is so special about the Sumerian Kings list? So the Sumerian Kings list is about 3,800 years old, and it contains a list of kings who ruled in Mesopotamia before the flood. So it mentions a worldwide flood. In the culture of the ancient Near East, there are about 50 different mentions of a worldwide flood, which means that when the Torah talks about a worldwide flood, it's speaking in a cultural environment in which people are all aware of the flood. Now, the Kings list lists many different kings who ruled in different cities in Mesopotamia, some of them for 28,800 years, and it's very clearly a blend between history, mythology, and fantasy. But the bottom line is that it talks about the kings who ruled before the flood, and then it goes into the stories after the worldwide flood. When we talk about the Babylonian or Sumerian, Mesopotamian flood stories, they really have to do with human beings causing a lot of noise and annoying the gods, and so the gods basically want to get rid of these pestilence and just wash them out. But the Torah's perspective is very different. If you take a close look at what it actually says about the cause for the flood, it has to do with immorality, and that is a completely novel approach to how to look at these ancient stories within a cultural background where everybody was talking about them, but they expressed a completely different vision of the connection between God and human beings. This brings us to the second story of the Sumerian Kings list. As its name implies, it's a list of kings. It basically lists this king ruled in this city for this number of years, followed by the next king who ruled in a particular city for a certain number of years. The 10 generations before and after the flood in the Torah also have hundreds of years. The longest living person there is Methuselah, who lives for 969 years. In the Sumerian Kings list, it's very clearly not a historic document because recording objective reality as an outside observer didn't really exist in the world until after the Enlightenment, in which that actually became important to people. So in the cultural background of the ancient Near East, this was definitely not trying to be a historic document. Furthermore, we have good reason to believe that some of the kings mentioned as ruling in Sumer after the flood were real kings, and yet there are other kings that we know that were very powerful rulers who are omitted from the list, which tells us that this is clearly a sort of political agenda. And it also tells us that after the flood washed over the earth, kingdom came down from heaven, meaning that these rulers, who we are telling you are the important people, are rulers by divine right. In contrast with that, the list in Noach doesn't deal really with kings, with the exception of the mention of Nimrod and Ashur, but it doesn't really talk about one king leading to another, but rather these are 10 generations, which means something else. And the question is, what exactly do they mean, and what access do we have to that cultural background to be able to understand it? The Sumerian Kings list uses a hexadecimal numbering system, which means a 60-base system, unlike our decimal system, which is a 10-based system. The system used in the Torah, it's not quite clear what it is, but it's clear that numbers mean something. Now, Chazal, our sages, take these numbers very seriously. They study them at length and derive a lot of meaning from them. Some opinions take them literally. I'm not getting into that. What I would like to say is, from a cultural background, making such lists carries meaning that isn't objective documentation. I'd like to give you two things to think about. The first one is the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, what's mistranslated often as ethics of the fathers. It really means chapters of principles, but that doesn't sell so well, does it? And in the 5th chapter, in the 2nd Mishnah, it says, Asara dorot me'adam ve'ad Noach, leodia kama erech apayim lefanav, and it continues, Asara dorot mi'Noach ve'ad Avraham, also leodia kama erech apayim milefanav. That means there are 10 generations between Adam to Noah, just to show God's mercy and God's tolerance and patience with humanity, who's screwing up and making all these problems. And after 10 generations, he finally did something about it, but he gave them a chance. And the same for the 10 generations up to Abraham, who then comes ahead and basically validates all of the effort that's been put into trying to make something of humanity and taking it forward. And finally, in a Byzantine period synagogue in the city of Ein Gedi, overlooking the Dead Sea, there is a mosaic floor which was excavated in the 1970s. I'm actually holding the publication here in my hands. Now, in this synagogue, there is a mosaic floor which has the opening text of Divrei Hayamim, the Book of Chronicles, which goes as follows: Adam, Shet, Enosh, Kinan, Mahalalel, Yared, Noach, Shem, Cham, V'Yefet. It basically covers the 10 generations from Adam to Noah. What do you think that verse meant to the average person who attended the synagogue 1,500 years ago? What was the consciousness of the human being who walked around the city of Ein Gedi in which that verse actually meant something? Something to think about. Let me know in the comments, and there's lots of information below.